Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Rebel Talk podcast. I'm your host, Zach Moreth. And as always, I'm here with your co-host, Daylan Flowers. Before we get into it, please like and subscribe our videos. We appreciate the support. Comment your thoughts below. We'll get back to you. And let's dive into it, Daylan. We're going to talk a little bit about Florida versus LSU. Really good performance from the Gators. And then obviously we're going to dive into Georgia versus Tennessee and how we think that can kind of affect the ranking of Ole Miss. And then to wrap it up, we're going to give you our predictions on the college football playoff rankings, which come out on Tuesday night. So just getting into our first matchup here, Florida defeated LSU 27-16. Florida looked good, Daylan. I'm not going to lie to you. This was a team that I wasn't really concerned about after beating Georgia, but I think it's definitely worth considering the fact that you're going into a hostile environment against a pretty solid team who beat a team that you lost to. And I do enjoy the fact that the game's at 11 a.m. and that a majority of the students will probably be on Thanksgiving break. I'm hoping that kind of affects the crowd. But there's no doubt that DJ Lagway and especially this defense can play, really being a problem for Garrett Musmeyer the entire game. I just wanted to get your initial thoughts on that one and what you think Ole Miss is going to have to do this Saturday.
I think you make a great point right there. I'm confident in our football team, especially the way they've been playing over the last 3 weeks. But I'd say I'm particularly happy this game is not at night and it's a really early game. Look, this is a game that even before the season started, I know everyone was looking at Florida and that back half of their schedule was like, no way they win more than any one game. And I mean, Florida's definitely, undoubtedly, in my opinion, had the hardest schedule within the entire nation this year. And it's funny for me going back. I remember watching Florida play Mississippi State earlier this season, if I'm not mistaken. And, I'm thinking, why are they continuing to play Graham Mertz? I think early on for me, it was like maybe trying to just get DJ comfortable with the entire system and having a little bit of leeway and also giving the offense a little bit of unfamiliarity for other teams so they didn't know how to really game plan for the Florida offense. But I still watched DJ kind of take good amount of snaps when Graham Mertz was healthy and then starting as well earlier the part of the season. And I just saw DJ continue just to play better than him. And that was just my simple thought, just a better passer, more athletic. I think DJ, for a young guy as well, he makes really smart plays. I mean, I watched the LSU game, the second half at least, and I really just watched DJ read his progressions really well. I watched him make the correct throws. And, something I watched DJ do really good for a young guy that, I'll jump into this really quick, but I won't go too far into it because I'll say this, most of this for the Tennessee-Georgia game. But DJ and Nico are two incredibly talented guys, both obviously really young and really inexperienced. But DJ, so many times to get out of the pocket and just throw the ball away. There was nothing open. I would watch Nico so many times against Georgia. And this isn't just a Georgia game. I've watched Tennessee a lot this year. And Nico will get out of the pocket and will try to make plays happen with his legs and will get sacked or will get tackled for a loss. And Tennessee ends up losing yards. And, and I hate to say this, even Jackson Dart has done that a lot this year. And I watched DJ Lagway simply just get out of the pocket. If nothing's open and he can't run effectively, throw it out of bounds. It's simple as that. And I watched DJ Lagway do that, and I'm like, he is really, really, really going to be really good in another year. And I think this Florida offense has obviously thrived tremendously when he's playing and healthy. I mean, they definitely could have beat Georgia. I think if he doesn't get hurt, I think in this standpoint, I'm kind of glad Georgia ends up winning that game for us as Ole Miss people. But DJ Lagway looks really good, man. And I think he's obviously the future of that team. And I think the team is behind him. And I think Billy Napier is fully behind him now as well. And that really beats hard. I mean, I was talking to a good buddy of mine who's a Florida fan, and he's telling me, he doesn't really necessarily think Florida can win, just kind of appealing how Ole Miss is playing currently on both sides of the ball, even on special teams. All three phases of Ole Miss football is really clicking right now. But it's definitely going to be, what some people call a trap game. Florida looks really, really good. And I think the security that Billy Napier got a few weeks ago kind of released a little tension off his shoulders to allow him to be a little bit more free and try different things that maybe we haven't seen from this Florida team currently before, the last 2 weeks, that now they're trying new things, especially now that they know that DJ is their guy. And for probably more of the rest of the season, because you probably won't see Graham Mertz back. DJ Lagway is going to be the starting quarterback for Florida, rightfully so. So it's going to be a tough game for the Rebels, but I'll say this as well, don't just kind of watch out for DJ Lagway in the offense, but this Florida defense looks really, really good. I mean, putting up 7 sacks against LSU. I mean, LSU is the offensive line that, just numbers wise, was the only team that I guess you say we struggled against. And the LSU offensive line has really been the best in the conference all season and one of the best offensive lines in the country, if not the best. So to see Florida go out there, have that type of confidence, have the correct game plan for Garrett Nussmeier and company, it's really impressive. And, for me, it just builds on how good this Florida team can be because, myself included, I didn't think they would have beat LSU. And it's funny because I've kind of been on that train that I really didn't think LSU was that good. And, some people will probably watch me and listen to me say that, man, like, we beat you guys, LSU beat you guys. And I completely understand that. But I don't think, and I wholeheartedly believe this, it was due to any of the fact that Garrett Nussmeier had a great game that night. He didn't. I really believe that our defense did every single thing right until the last 3 minutes of the fourth quarter, and then obviously the touchdown drive in overtime. And that's okay, I think Garrett Nussmeier can be really good, but I don't think that Brian Kelly has a system put up correctly for Garrett Nussmeier to be well, and I don't think he understands the game well enough to have good pocket presence, have good accuracy, and as well use his feet when needed. So going into that, I still thought LSU had enough momentum and understanding, coming off a loss the week before, they understood what the goal was, and that is if you win out, they still have a chance to go to maybe the SEC championship game and, still possibly get to the college football playoff, even though, Bama just blew them out and decimated them. But I didn't see that, and I saw a Florida team that looked revitalized, and that's something that I haven't, really seen from this Florida team all year. And I hope we don't lean too much on just what we've done over the last few weeks. I think the bye week came at a great time for Ole Miss to regroup, understand, kind of sit back and watch how Florida will play with DJ Lagway for a full game, and as well get some of the guys that we kind of want back for this later part of the season. But it's going to be fun, and I think one big thing as well that I'll kind of leave off. Florida is a run-heavy offense when DJ Lagway is using his legs as well. An athletic guy, not the quickest guy, but definitely is smart with his legs. A pretty powerful guy as well, can put his shoulder down, can run over a linebacker if needed. This is going to be a fun one. A 10.5-point favorite against Florida right now. I'd probably say that will probably move throughout the week, but it's going to be a fun game. I think obviously this game is going to have to be won on the line of scrimmage on both sides. Like I think a lot of our games have kind of been matched up on really well, and I'm excited to see our offensive line against Florida's defensive line. I think our offensive line since the Oklahoma game has played really, really well, and I think no one's really given John Garrison and the offensive line a lot of props since the Oklahoma game for doing really well. They, just pass block really well. I've seen a run block improve. The penalties have really been lessened over the last 3 weeks, and I've just seen a lot of improvement. And like I just said, Florida had 7 sacks against, I guess you would say, the premier offensive line in the SEC this year. So that's, for me, is going to be the key matchup. How do we protect Dart, give him enough time to make plays, and how do we effectively control our own tempo? And that's something that I think we will have to really just do well against Florida if we want to have a chance.
Absolutely, Daylan. And to me, you have to approach this game as if how you're going to approach your playoff game, because now you're going on the road, wherever that may be. But right now you're falling in that category of having the first game on a college campus that isn't in Oxford, Mississippi. Yeah. This is your last time to really capitalize on that in the swamp, which is a very hostile environment. We're talking about basically 100,000 crowd. It's going to be insane, especially with Ole Miss, being a really hot team. And I do think them beating LSU really does kind of motivate the fans to come out again and be like, hey, this team has some fight and we're capable of pulling off that comeback. Daylan mentioned it, but 7 sacks is ridiculous. I mean, if you guys were watching this game, it felt like every play, they were getting after Nussmeier, something that Ole Miss didn't do the best at when they played LSU. And it goes to show that this Florida team, I like the term you said, they're revitalized and they're ready to go. So teams got to take this seriously with a really good approach. And I do think if you win out, you fully secure your spot in the playoffs. And part of that being is because of this Georgia win over Tennessee, Dalen. Georgia won 31-17. In my opinion, this should be enough to push Tennessee below Ole Miss. At the same time, I think Georgia's going to pass Ole Miss. Not that I agree with that, but you saw it happen in the AP poll and the coaches poll. And if I had to throw a guess out, I would imagine it's going to be 3 for 3 and that the college football playoff poll is going to do the same thing. But it cancels out if Ole Miss moves ahead of Tennessee, which should be the goal for them. But how about, Carson Beck? He throws for almost 350. Second half looked incredible. It looked like the Georgia team that we were used to seeing. And this really just gives a lot of credit to Ole Miss for not only shutting Georgia down in the first half, but Georgia's been a really good second half team. You saw it against Alabama. You saw it last night against Tennessee. And they come out and get a field goal, and it's a 6-point game against Ole Miss. And then Jackson Dart leads the team down the field with an incredible drive, probably the best drive of the Rebel season, and you extend the game and you win by 3 possessions. So again, a really, really heavy credit to Ole Miss for extending that game and being able to pull away from a strong, heavy second half Georgia team. But I just want to get your thoughts on the Georgia-Tennessee game. I know you talked about Nico a little bit, Dalen, but how do you think this kind of affects Ole Miss moving forward?
Excuse me. I try not to play myself just personally. I try not to play too much in what the committee is thinking because it's weird. Our 2 losses are, the LSU, they just have lost 3 straight, and obviously losing to USC the first game of the season, it looks bad on us. And obviously losing at home to Kentucky. I mean, standings wise, second worst team in the conference, obviously doesn't look good either. But I look at Tennessee and they got decimated by Arkansas. I mean, I know it came down to the last drive, but just watching the game, I didn't see that same offense compared to how they were playing the first 4 weeks before that game. And then, we go to Fayetteville and 30-piece them. And I mean, it really could have been more if, we don't put our second and third strings in the fourth quarter, in the late fourth quarter. But I think Georgia understood the situation they were in. I think that Kirby understood that they still have a chance to rewrite what had happened in Oxford the week before. And it's crazy to me because on game day, Saturday morning, I'm hearing Kirk Herbstreit and a lot of the crew just kind of relate Tennessee's defensive line to Ole Miss defensive line. And, I think that's a okay comparison, but you watch the game and you see there's nothing really comparable. I truly believe that we have the best defensive line in the country, and that's not me being biased. That's not me just being an Ole Miss fan. That's not me just kind of being, tied in between with the players that I know. I believe that. I've watched the eyes of this defense. I've watched how this defensive line rotates and sets and plays off each other and plays on the outside and plays on the inside compared to other defensive lines. And I just think we're the best. I think we have the best talent. I think we have the best depth. And I didn't watch Tennessee do that at all. And, some people will say, oh, but you guys are at home, and that's a completely different scenario than being at Sanford Stadium. That's great, but football is football. And, I raved about Georgia's offensive line last week. I mean, they have guys who will, play in Sundays for a long time.
Yeah.
But Carson Beck got protected. And even when he didn't, I watched a different Carson Beck play against Tennessee than he played against us. He used his legs incredibly well, especially in the red zone area, to get a first down or get touchdowns and make things happen. Then even when the offense was shut down, he opened some things up with his feet. And as well, I mean, Carson Beck is weird. I watched him last year, and I'm like, this dude is going to be ridiculous in the rest of his college career and even in the league. And it's this year I'm watching him just make a lot of headache plays. Went 25 for 40 against Tennessee. I believe he went 20 for 31 against us. And, it's something that I expected. Tennessee, I mean, Georgia's offense, they're going to pass the football. I wholeheartedly believe that. I think Trevor Etienne is one of the most elusive running backs in the country. But they're going to expect Carson Beck to at least throw the ball 30-plus times every game. And that's how they're going to run their system. And he has to adapt to, like he just did against Tennessee, and using his legs effectively and making correct decisions downfield when they're needed and not the dumb ones. I thought he showed a lot of poise and confidence and as well leadership that just simply didn't happen in Oxford. And it's crazy to me just how much that can turn around in 1 week. And that's just kind of the exemplary of why college football is so great, because you can have one really bad weekend and the next weekend you can come back and make amends for everything. And I think this gives the committee something just really difficult to talk about, but as well, it gives the SEC something almost, I would say, kind of just looking at it, impossible to kind of figure out going towards the end of the season. Because at this point, I don't, obviously we don't know that Auburn won't win out. We don't know that Kentucky won't beat Texas. But you just basing it that off the possibilities, we're going to end up with one team, either A&M or Texas having only one loss, and then 3 or 4 teams with 2 losses, and that kind of puts everyone in the bind. So that's going to be a weird position, but I think this win was equally important for us that Georgia beat Tennessee, because it gives our win over Georgia a little bit of more spice for us. I mean, I love that we didn't just beat Georgia. We beat them down really bad. We dominated them. And that's something that I really want to see against Florida as well. How can we make amends for our loss in Baton Rouge? And that is going to Florida, a team that just beat LSU, and having a South Carolina type game, which, by the way, that win looks so much incredibly good for us right now than it did, 2 months ago. But I really just would like to see us come out and just gun against Florida. But back to Georgia and Tennessee, said earlier, Nico, I think it's going to be great. Obviously he showed so many great flashes this year, but it's just his inexperience is shown over some of the courses of the big games this season for Tennessee. And I mean, that's okay. He's a young guy. I mean, he obviously has not had much in-game experience other than this season, and that's just going to come with time being on the field. But what separates great quarterbacks to young guys is, how do I make the correct decisions? Even when it's not when I'm throwing the football. It's, how do I tell my offensive line, watch this linebacker because he's about to blitz? Or how do I tell my receiver on the outside, this is a route you're supposed to run, but I see this safety coming up, but he's actually about to drop back and cover, so you actually need to come back in the middle of the field instead of going out. That's where a quarterback is elite. That's what makes a quarterback elite, from great to good. And I watched Carson Beck do that this weekend. And I think if they can continue to do that, then Georgia's going to be Georgia, and they're going to be a problem to any team that they face. So it's going to be a weird way to run off this season. But this, for me, and then I'll get off my talking yap. But for me, it's just a weird season for Ole Miss. But how I watched this team play against the Georgia Bulldogs a week ago just kind of releases a lot of stress off my shoulders. I mean, every single phase of the game. Austin Simmons comes in. Ulysses Bentley gets a touchdown on that drive. Caden Lee looks incredible. I've been raving about the guy all week. John Saunders Jr. has been playing his mind off. Chris Poopall Jr. has been taking the greatest leadership role from a linebacker I've seen in the country this year. And I saw a team that looked motivated, but as well that looked like no one in this country could stop them from being who they were, and that's an elite football team. And I'm really excited to see how this regular season falls out for Ole Miss, but I think Georgia's going to have a really tough time playing against Georgia Tech. I know Georgia Tech's record does not look the best right now, but I think Haynes King and Georgia Tech can really give any team in the country run for their money when they're playing their best football. And I don't want to say Georgia Tech can win that game, but I definitely think they can push Georgia to the down of the wire. So that final game for Georgia, now that they're done with conference play officially, is definitely going to be a game for people to watch out for as well.
And there's a bunch of those going on, Dylan. I wanted to get into this, the rankings that are going to come out on Tuesday. I think Ole Miss is going to land probably in the 9 spot or 10, similar to the AP and the coaches poll. But then, there's obviously the ranking, and then they go into the bracket, which has to include your Big 12 and your ACC winner, which we currently don't have right now in the AP poll. So unfortunately, you could be looking at the 10 or 11 seed in that bracket again, just depending on the route that they take. But, it's important to understand that right now, there is no ACC or Big 12 team above Ole Miss in the rankings. And unfortunately, it has to be that way for the playoff bracket, which I don't think is good for college football. That's just my opinion. But, looking at some of these big games, Indiana versus Ohio State is massive. Games going on in Columbus. Of course, it's at 11 a.m., same time.
Yeah.
I feel like that's happened like so many times this year.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever, that's all right. My point being, if Indiana loses this game as they're supposed to by a lot, I think they are so far gone from the playoffs. Their schedule is easily the weakest in the country that I've seen. And if you can't compete against, the best team in your conference, how are you supposed to go into the college football playoffs and compete against SEC teams? It's not possible. So hopefully Ohio State can put Indiana in their place. But if that's not the case, then it's going to be very interesting. Also, Texas or Texas A&M, they still have to play in the future here. And then Notre Dame, I don't want to sleep on this. They got to play Army, who's a top 25 team. And then they go to Southern California in a very heated rivalry game where anything can happen. And Notre Dame, they bounced back from Northern Illinois, lost early in the year, and they've looked great recently. But I do want to take into account that they have two super competitive games coming up. Tuesday night, Daylan, it's going to be interesting. Again, I want our fans to take this with a grain of salt. You made a thing on Twitter about how, the AP poll doesn't really matter right now, but there's so many more weeks to be played here.
Yeah.
If Ole Miss just wins, it's going to take care of itself. Right now, you're in the picture. The only way you can get eliminated from that is if you lose. So I just want to get your thoughts, maybe a message to the fans. But where do you see Ole Miss sitting here on Tuesday?
Probably at 9. And like I said, I personally don't I don't want to say I don't care that much. I don't buy into the we need to put all of our beans in one bowl right now, and that's what the committee is thinking. I think listening to the coaching staff, Lane Kiffin especially, and talking to some players and hearing a lot of players in press conferences, this team has one thing in mind, and that's going 1-0 every week. That needs to continue to be the mindset, and I know it will, but that's the only focus right now. Go 1-0. Worry about the day we're on, worry about the game we're preparing for, and that's all we can do. We can't play the what if game. We can't play the what's it going to take game. We put ourselves in a situation that if we win out, I think we'll be okay. And as well, I don't know. Let me ask you this, and then I'll come back to your point. Would you be, I think I'm more comfortable if we went out but don't go to the SEC championship game and have a 3-week break and then play a playoff game. But I know there's some people that want the possibility to go to Atlanta and have that opportunity. And I don't want I have a reason why I would obviously love to see us go, but then I have a reason why I'm kind of about going. And that reason is obviously I'm realistic. We're Ole Miss. We haven't been to a SEC championship game in a very long time. And I would love for this team, and for this program to make that happen. But as well, I would be very reminiscent if I said we would go to that game, we ended up losing, and we would still have a chance in making the 12-team playoff. Now, I don't know how the committee would rank that, if we only lost by 3 points, or, even then, how would they put a 3-loss team in the 12-team playoff? I don't know. So I would love to hear what you think about that. Would you like to see us be in the SEC championship game, or would you maybe just rather us have a 3-week break and then be fully prepared for the playoffs?
Look, there's a lot of pros and cons, and it's outrageous. If you look at the SEC standings, there's probably like a million variations of how this could play out. But I don't want to see us in the SEC championship. I want to be 2 teams who are ahead of us right now or in that final week. So maybe you're looking at Texas, Alabama. Maybe Georgia sneaks their way in there if Texas loses or anything like that. But I want two teams who are ahead of us to play in it. I do understand that if you win the SEC championship, you get to bye the first week of the playoffs. I get it, right? I understand it. SEC championship means a lot, especially to the Ole Miss fans who've been around for a long time.
Yeah.
But the thing that is most concerning to me is the risk of injury in that game.
Yeah.
You're asking your team to come off a short recovery week against Mississippi State and then turn around and play in this SEC championship game where basically everything's on the line. And if you lose, you don't get that bye week versus the team that wins. And then it's a whole new conversation on if you should even make the playoffs because of that third loss. And it's a lot of complications that I would like to avoid. But I think it is crucial that if Ole Miss is not in the SEC championship, which right now the odds are that they're not going to be, needs to be two teams that are ranked in front of them. What I don't want to see is a team like Texas A&M squeak in there, or if somehow something crazy happens and Tennessee works their way back in. That's probably the situation which you want to avoid. But yeah, there's a lot. It's a good conversation. We're going to have to see how it shakes out. I would love an SEC championship, but there's a lot of things that scare me. And I just want to see Ole Miss play in the college football playoffs.
I agree, man. So I'm glad to hear you say that. And I'll kind of go back on the playoff. You mentioned the Indiana-Ohio State game. I think that really matters on how close the game is. Yeah. I mean, if Ohio State is up 21 at halftime, but Indiana comes back and they only lose by 3, I wholeheartedly believe they'll still keep Indiana in the 12 part of the rankings. I still say deservedly. I mean, I know it's a lot of animosity talk and who have they played and blah blah blah. And I don't care. I'm saying this. I would say the same thing about Texas. I mean, I think Texas is one of the 12 best teams in the country. I think with any given team in the country, they can match up really well. But they have had a fairly substantial conference schedule compared to other teams. And they play one big game in Austin against Georgia, and the Bulldogs go down and take care of them. And for me, it's like, again, I hate to just bring this point up again, but we didn't just beat Georgia. We won every single part of the game. We dominated their offensive line. We crushed their running game. They had decent running holes, but at the end of the game, we crushed their running game. Carson Beck couldn't find any time throughout the game to make any plays. And even when he did, I watched our defense be smarter than him and still stop a lot of his passing opportunities. I watched our run game not be great against Georgia, but show a lot more greater signs than I've seen this run game have all season long. I watched Jackson Dart show a bit of leadership, but as well clutchness that I haven't seen him have throughout really before the OU game, that entire conference schedule run. I watched Caden Lee continue to evolve into a great receiver, might I add. I watched Juice Wells show his impact that he can have in the red zone. I watched Jordan Watkins continue to make good plays when they were needed. And I watched the offensive line that looked like they can compete with any defensive line in the country. So when I bring that up and I see this same team go down to Austin and handle business, it's hard for me to depict these are the same teams that can match up with Ole Miss. And I look at, like you said, Notre Dame, and they had a great win first game of the season against Texas A&M, but then they dropped to Northern Illinois at home. I just don't know, and especially the Notre Dame part that they're not in the conference either, so that makes it even more difficult to play around Notre Dame. That'll be really funky to see how the committee matches Notre Dame up compared to other teams. So I don't know. Kirby Smart kind of said in his post game against Tennessee that he doesn't really know what the committee is looking for. And although sometimes I get tired of Kirby kind of talking about that, I truly agree with that statement. I genuinely don't know. And that kind of puts us in a bye. But at the same time, I don't want us to be worried about that. And say the case we're put at 10 or 11. I'm okay with that. I think that may give our team a bit of boost going into Gainesville that they feel like they have a chip on their shoulder. They have something to really play and show for that maybe they wouldn't get if we're put at 8 or 9. So I'm not really putting too much thought into it right now. Take care of business against Florida. Prepare really well. Have fun. I think we'll be just fine, man.
Absolutely. And I think the key for this game, I'd like to win by probably a touchdown or more,
Yeah.
preferably more. But I think if you go down to the Swamp and win by 7 points or more, and hopefully make it a game where it never really feels close, similar to the Georgia game, I think that would be perfect. Because again, Florida just beat LSU by 11. Like the team can play, man. And then you got to come home and wrap it up against State. It's going to be their Super Bowl. They're going to hype this game up like nothing before. I do think it's important to consider that their roster is just simply bad. I know it's so disrespect, but they are a terrible football team right now with a brand new coaching staff. There's a lot going on, but we'll continue to dive into that throughout the week, especially this Florida matchup. Dale and I will be back previewing that game, what to look out for, and hopefully watch the Rebs take care of business on Saturday morning. But that's all I got for you guys. Dalen, anything else, brother?
No, man. Let's have a great week, y'all. Hotty Toddy.
Hotty Toddy. One last thing. Dalen has an interview with Austin Simmons coming out on our YouTube this week. Shout out to Dalen for getting that done. But as always, like and subscribe, and I appreciate you guys listening. Hotty Toddy. Go Rebs.